Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Professor Norman Cornett, religious studies scholar and specialist on the relationship between religion, culture, and politics, with the Pastor Brandon Holthaus of Rock Harbor Church in Bakersfield, California, USA. Thank you for joining us.
You betcha. My pleasure.
As a religious studies scholar, and specifically in the history of the religious studies, I'm acutely aware that in antiquity, there was a major theologian and philosopher by the name of Augustine,
Yeah.
who published a book that is considered a touchstone of Christian theology and philosophy. It's called Civitas Dei, City of God.
Yeah.
When Augustine was trying to come to terms with the sack of Rome, and Rome was at the time considered heaven on earth, it was the epicenter of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And he grappled with the issue, how could this happen to the city of God on earth? And then he began in this very long essay to say that there is one stream, the city of humanity, the city of humans, the city of man, and then there's the city of God. And they intertwine, but they are different. And if we go ahead for centuries later, based on Augustine and their reading of Augustine, people such as Dr. Martin Luther, who is one of the originators of the Protestant Reformation, the German theologian. He was an Augustinian monk. I had the privilege of visiting his monastery in Erfurt, Germany, and actually going into the room where he defended his doctoral thesis at the University of Erfurt. Well, Martin Luther proposed that in his interpretation of the gospel, the two swords theory, there is the sword for the kingdom of God, but then there's the sword for the kingdom of humans, and you had to have different rules in these. And then later with Henry VIII, who is the founder of the Church of England, he breaks from Catholicism, he breaks from Rome, and he says that now we are going to have a political ruler as the head of the Church of England. So the idea of separating church and state, which became a first principle of the United States of America. And in fact, this takes us to a principle that we have been studying in church history since the Reformation, namely secularism, separating the sacred and the temporal, the divine and the human. What is your working definition, Brandon Holthaus, of secularism?
Well, secularism is obviously devoid of God's principles, God's programs, God's values. It is mankind's attempt, if you want to call it humanism, it is mankind's attempt to self-govern himself without using those principles. And I agree that church and the state should be separate. No doubt about that, because the church made a huge mistake, even in Constantine's day, of marrying the church with the state. And it becomes deadly at that point in time. Even in Martin Luther and Calvin's period of time in the Protestant Reformation, a lot of the reformers didn't separate enough the church from the state. And therefore, when they wanted to practice church discipline, they used the state to practice church discipline. Catholic Church was infamous for doing that, burning people at the stake, those types of things. And so that development of separation of church and state, it needs to happen, because then, unfortunately, when you blend the two, there's where the abuse starts happening. And so, yes, secularism is ran by man-made rules, man-made laws. We would hope that in that secular state, they would accommodate Christian values and accommodate Christian principles, but unfortunately, it doesn't typically. It typically goes a different direction, like we're seeing in the West happen. So this has been the rallying call of, well, how much separation do we need? I definitely understand the separation of not using the government police force to church discipline people. I get that. But when we talk about separation of church and state, does that mean that the state needs to be devoid of all notions of Christianity or of human decency, of values of the West? That's the problem we're having, is we are in a revolution of completely jettisoning all of Christian value and principles for secularism. And unfortunately, that leaves a vacuum for some pretty harsh totalitarian, authoritarian mindsets like communism, Marxism, socialism, globalism to fill in that gap. So that becomes the debate of how much separation do we need? Look what has happened in our schools. They have completely separated our schools from God, and no one can say, with any common sense, can say, yeah, that was a good thing that we took God out of the schools. It was a good thing that we took the 10 Commandments out of the schools, or we took prayer. Because look at our schools now. They're now grooming people for, we don't know if someone's a male or female now, or they're grooming them to change their genitalia. That's obviously went too far. And that's not what we want. And unfortunately, this is what the West is up to. So we get the idea of separation of church and state, and then it's for some reason people codify that with our Constitution, and it's not in our Constitution. It was a letter written by Thomas Jefferson, and what he wanted with the intent of that was the state to stay out of the church's business. Unfortunately, in the West, we've seen this in America, and you've seen this in Canada. You've had the state encroach into the church and say the church is not essential. It needs to shut down for viruses. It needs to shut down for whatever reason. Well, hey, wait a second. That's exactly what Thomas Jefferson was saying should not happen. You don't have a right to tell the church to not meet, to not sing. But yet all through the West, these secularists were telling the church, you're non-essential, shut up, go back to your homes, and don't meet. And we saw that all through the West. So there's a line there. And then the other thing, the challenge we face in America is we have what's called this Christian nationalism, which again, they go too far in wanting to force Christianity on the culture. And we're not for that either. So there's a balance here, obviously, between the secular and the sacred. No doubt about that. But where is that line? That becomes a debatable point. I think the Christian nationalists go too far, saying they want to Christianize the world and force Christianity down people's throat. That's not how we spread Christianity. But the alternative, or actually the other polar opposite, is also true as well. I don't want to see raw paganism in my country anymore. I don't want to see people that we've imported into our country, whether it's Islam, whether it's Haitian, bringing in voodoo, bringing in other religions that then fill in the gap because secularism has pushed Christianity so far out. We're seeing this all over Europe. Europe is done. They will be taken over by Islam within a decade or two. They have allowed too much immigration, Muslim immigration, because secularism pushed out Christianity. So the gap was filled by Islam. And the same thing is happening here in America.
Well, I've attended several services here at Rock Harbor Church, of which you're the senior pastor. When I was young, it was always said in family or social gatherings, there's two things you can never talk about, religion and politics.
Right.
Well, what intrigues me is how much religion and politics go hand in hand in Rock Harbor Church.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that?
Sure. You were at our conference and you saw Carl Tykrib speak, which he's from Canada. And here's the point that Carl made, and this is the point that I'm going off of as well. Carl made the point that he goes to Burning Man, he goes to the Bohemian Groves, and he goes to the World Council of Churches, he goes to the World Economic Forum meetings of these globalists. And what he finds out and what he discovers is their religion is becoming our politics. And so what I have seen for a long time, and Carl again proves this, is that these political policies are not stemming from political mindsets. They're actually coming from a pagan religion mindset. So whether we talk about open borders, whether we talk about globalism, or whether we talk about just people having the ability to have sex with whoever and whenever, whatever they want, that's all stemming from a pagan idea. So since that's happening, since these political things are happening, even the economy, the economy, the green economy that they're pushing all over Europe, all over the West, is stemming from worshiping the creation rather than the creator. And they're destroying economies left and right. So I can speak into that because I see it's not as political, that's a religious issue. This false notion that human beings are a cancer on the planet, that we're a virus on the planet, is coming straight from paganism. So I'm going to attack the green movement of getting rid of fossil fuels because I know the agenda behind that. So I will speak to something like that. And therefore, that's where I'm working from, that paradigm of, wait a second, this is not politics anymore. This is not about, whether we get some guy in office or whatever because he suits my political agenda. We're dealing with like right and wrong, good and evil, and a false religion versus true religion. And so therefore, I feel obligated as a pastor to speak into that. Now, people might say to me, well, Brandon, you're too political. My response is, that's religion. If you say that coming against abortion and murdering babies in the wombs of their mothers is political, I'm sorry, I don't see that as political. That's religious.
So you perceive what's happening now as, in effect, spiritualizing the temporal, sacralizing the political, but it is a false spirituality. It is a false sacredness.
Yes, it's coming from individuals that are practicing Wicca, Satanism, Marxism, communism, socialism. All those isms are a religion. They say, well, Marxism or communism didn't tout itself to be religion. Yeah, but it has all the fundamentals of a religion when you study it. I was there at Columbia, and I heard these communists and Marxists teach in my classes as a political science major. And coming out of their mouth was nothing but religion. It wasn't just political. It was a religious ideology. So my thing is, if I see a false religion, I'm obligated as a pastor to attack that false religion and expose it for what it is. And unfortunately, people can't discern that the politics now reflect the people's religion. That's what's starting to happen. And so I feel obligated, just as I would expose a cult, just like I would expose a false religion like Islam or Mormonism or Jehovah's Witness or whatever, I'm going to expose Marxism because it's a religion. I'm going to expose Keynesian economics because that's based off of religion. I'm going to expose globalism because that's going against the Bible. So that's how I see it.
It's very interesting because you preach the Bible and you teach the Bible, and you have integrated here at Rock Harbor Church religion and politics. What intrigues me is that you actually studied political science at Columbia University in New York City.
Go figure.
So it was almost preparatory to your understanding of how we interpret the Bible, how we read the scriptures, and their relevance to current events.
Absolutely. I don't think it was an accident that that God let me go to Columbia, but we can talk about it after the break. But God prepares people for different periods of time, and I see how God was preparing me to understand the politics of the day, to speak into it from a biblical standpoint.
Well, could you share with us your website so we can get more information?
Yeah, go to rockharborchurch.net or tipofthespearministries.com. All of our resources are there.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Professor Norman Cornett, religious studies scholar and specialist on the relationship between religion, culture, and politics. Thank you for joining us.